Hello. I know it's been a while since I've made a video, but I got a book called On Sparta, which is just a collection of some of Plutarch's lives relating to Spartan leaders. But in the end, it has a section called the Sayings of Sparta, or Sayings of Spartans. And there were a few that I highlighted that I thought were really interesting, and I was just going to read them to you guys, and hopefully you'll be able to get something out of it. So, Agasicles, a 6th century king, said, Agasicles, king of the Spartans, despite his fondness for intellectual discourse, would not entertain the sophist Philophanes. When someone expressed surprise at this, he declared, I want to be the student of men whose son I should like to be as well. And I think that's a good one for someone like Stefan Molyneux to take a page out of, because arguments, intellectual capacity, it's not the most important thing in the world. It is important, but it's not the most important thing in the world. Now here's another quote by Agesilaus, who ruled from 400 to 360 BC, said, even when he had grown old, he maintained the same regimen, or the same regime. So to the man who acquired why on attaining such an age he still went about without any undergarment in the depths of winter, he said, so that the young men may do the same, with the oldest men and office holders as their examples. Leading by example, being the model that you want to see, that's important. It's good they understood that. The same king, Agesilaus, the Thasians, again, because of their belief that he was bringing them such notable benefits, the king, had honored the king with temples and deification, and had dispatched an embassy to him in this connection. He read the list of honors conveyed to him by the envoys and inquired whether their country had the power to deify humans, to turn humans into gods. And when they said that it did, the king replied, very well, make yourselves gods first, and then when you have achieved that, I shall believe your claim that you are able to make me a god too. So basically, show it, don't tell it. You gotta be able to do it yourself before you can improve someone else. Same king, upon noticing a house in Asia roofed with square beams, he asked the owner whether trees grew square in that area. When told no, they grew round, he said, what then? If they grew square, would you make them round? So basically, don't change something unless you have to. Look to nature as a guide. Why change something in nature if it's already good? So the same king, Agesilaus, says, when questioned as to how he had gained such a great reputation, the king said, by having despised death. Same king, when somebody drew his attention to the solid city wall with its exceptionally strong construction, and inquired if it made a favorable impression upon him. By Zeus, he said, favorable but for women to live inside, not men. Which sort of, alludes to the fact that women prefer security and men prefer liberty. We're seeing that acted out in the Western civilization right now. When someone inquired of him what children should learn, the king said, "What they will also use when they become men." When, after the conclusion of peace, there was brought to him from the Persian king a letter offering ties of hospitality and friendship conveyed by the Persian accompanying the Spartan Callias, the king rejected it and gave instructions for it to be reported back to the king that there was no need to send him letters privately. Instead, if he proved a genuine friend of Sparta and meant well towards Greece, then to the utmost Agesilaus too would himself be his friend. However, should he be caught scheming against us, then not even if I receive ever so many letters, should he believe that he will have a friend for me, or that he will have me for a friend. So basically saying, he's not going to receive a private letter from the Persian king suing for peace. If you're going to make a public decision as king, which is what the king would do, then the information should be transparent and available to the public. He didn't want to do dealings behind closed doors. He wanted his people to know exactly how he was dealing with the enemy, which I think is something we could use in America. At the battle near Mantinea, the king urged the Spartans to ignore the rest of the soldiers and fight Epaminondas, asserting that only the intelligent are brave, and they alone are responsible for a victory. So, if they should kill him, it would be very easy for them to overcome the rest, since the rest were unintelligent and negligible. And so it turned out. For just when victory was going to Epaminondas, and a rout was underway, one of the Spartans struck him a mortal blow as he had turned around and was urging on his own men. Once he had fallen, Agesilaus' men reversed their retreat and put the victory in the balance again, with the Thebans now making a much worse showing and the Spartans a much better one. To equate intelligence with bravery, or not to equate the two, but to say that intelligence is a necessary prerequisite for true bravery, that's good stuff. So Agis, son of Archidamus, king who ruled from 427 to 400, said, "When asked what form of training was most practiced at Sparta, he replied, 'Understanding of how to take orders and how to give them.'" Which reminds me of what Friedrich Nietzsche said about the last men in, I think it was Thus Spoke Zarathustra, about how the last man would no longer know how to lead or to follow. Is no more, because to be able to take orders and to give them recognizes hierarchy. And we're now in an age where hierarchy is unbearable to the resentful masses. So the Spartans knew how to take orders and how to give them. They understood the necessity of hierarchy. When some sophist stated, "Speech is the most powerful thing of all," the king replied, "Well, in that case, if you're silent, you are worthless." That's good. I like that. When someone was presenting proposals for a government program of the Greeks, which, while not ignoble, was difficult to put into effect, the king replied, "My friend, your words need to be complemented by force and money." I wish that was something people understood today. especially the politicians. Free college, free education, free healthcare. My friend, your words need to be complemented with force and money. Here's another king, Agus the Younger, who ruled from 338 to 331, said, to the wretched character who kept asking him who was the best Spartan, his response was, the one least like you. Different king, Anaxagoras, said, when another person was inquiring why in their wars Spartans confidently faced danger, he said, because we practice proper respect for life, not fear of it like the rest of mankind. A different king, Antiochus, to the Athenian who was calling the Spartans uneducated, the king said, at least we are the only ones who have learned nothing wicked from you. Which reminds me of like people who make fun of rednecks or like hillbillies or people out in the country and stuff. They might not be as educated, like in the book learning, but at least they haven't learned the wicked vices of the highly educated city slicking folks. So sometimes it's good not to be educated, especially in a time when education means being indoctrinated into some corrupt bullshit. As some Athenian was reading a funeral eulogy in praise of the men killed by the Spartans, he said, what then do you think was the quality of our men who defeated them? I really like, this kind of shows that the Greeks never really thought of their enemies as being evil. They never thought of their enemies as being despicable. If you had a despicable enemy that was sad, I mean, you didn't even mention them, you didn't honor them, you didn't praise, you didn't even talk about them. But when the Athenians had wars with the Spartans, they understood both sides were decent people. Now we're at the point where people aren't capable of that sort of enmity. And when they do declare someone to be an enemy, they have to create like a cartoonishly evil portrait of that person. We've moved so far away from the Greeks. Archidamus said to the man who was praising Charalaus because he behaved kindly to all alike, he said, and how might anyone properly be praised if he behaves gently towards scoundrels too? So for thousands of years, people have been talking about things like kindness is not a virtue. Being kind to everybody is not something to be proud of. And here's another one. Archidamus, son of Zeuxidamus, to the man who was praising a lyre player and marveling at his ability, he said, dear friend, what kind of compliment will you find to bestow on true men when you praise a lyre player in these terms? Such a different world. I mean, imagine if they would have seen how much people praise Hollywood actors and rock musicians and stuff. And I like music and I like movies as much as anyone else. But actors and musicians getting like the top-notch celebrity status in our society, that's absurd. That's just that shows that there's a huge problem, honestly. Same king, when he observed his son fighting the Athenians recklessly, he said, either increase your strength or reduce your self-confidence. That's a good one. Archidamus, son of Agesilaus, ruled from 360 to 338, said, "Since Periander the doctor was professionally well respected and very highly recommended, but used to write dreadful poetry, the king said to him, 'Why ever is it, Periander, that you are so keen to be called a bad poet instead of an excellent doctor?'" That just shows a good sense of humor. Now this is a good one. I like this one a lot. Aesticratidas, I'm butchering these names, I'm sorry, said, "After the defeat of King Agis at the battle near Antipater, near Megalopolis, when someone said to Aristocratus, 'What will you do, Spartans? Surely you won't become slaves to the Macedonians?' And he replied, 'What? Could Antipater stop us from dying fighting for Sparta?'" And that's true freedom. I mean, when you're free, you're free. Because you'll die fighting for freedom, and dying in the fight for it is a maintenance of freedom down to the last breath. And people understood that in the past. Brasidas, who was a distinguished commander in the early years of the Peloponnesian War, Brasidas said, "After catching a mouse among some dried figs, got bitten by the mouse and let it go. Then he said to those who were around, 'There is nothing so tiny that it lacks the courage to repel its assailants and save itself.'" I mean, when the Spartans were fighting against something like the Persian Empire, you could see how they would have some sympathy for the mouse in that situation. There's nothing so small that it lacks the courage to repel its assailants and save itself. Nothing so small, except the modern man. Damis, with reference to the instructions about voting that Alexander the Great was a god, Damis said, "Let us agree that Alexander be called a god if he so wishes." They had a sense of humor back then, that's for sure. There's more. I've gotten through about half of these. There's a couple hundred in this book. They're all really interesting. So maybe I'll make a part 2 because this has already gone on long enough. But there's also a section of the Sayings of Spartan Women, which I might make a part 3 and just do a series of Spartan sayings. But anyway, this video has gone on long enough. I hope you enjoyed my favorite Spartan sayings. Thank you for watching. Good night.